Beneath Scotland's misty mountains and beyond its rugged shores lies a city shaped by time, Edinburgh, where history and legends are intertwined. The city's Gothic architecture creates a dramatic skyline, casting shadows over narrow closes and cobbled streets that hold centuries of stories and secrets. Scotland has been on my bucket list for years for this reason, along with my growing fascination of the drama-filled life of Mary, Queen of Scots, and her legacy, which is as mysterious as the Queen herself, especially the relationship she had with her cousin, Queen Elizabeth I. And so, at last, I booked my trip for October, where I could wander Edinburgh's streets and hear the whispers of its haunted past and experience a true autumn in this storied city. I hope you enjoy this travel diary of my trip to Edinburgh, Scotland, and beyond. My friend Dave and I left Los Angeles on Monday, which also happened to be my birthday, and arrived in Edinburgh early Tuesday morning. The weather was cool, crisp, and overcast, exactly what I'd expect for Scotland in autumn, as we boarded the tram that took us to the city center, hoping we could stay awake to jump right into a day's worth of sightseeing. Our first hotel was in the Georgian-esque New Town area of Edinburgh called Yotel Edinburgh, which is a newer, modular, space-age type of hotel. Our room was small, but it was centrally located. We had a quick breakfast nearby before we hit the ground running. Our first stop was the picturesque Dean Village. It was formerly known as the Water of Leith Village and was a successful grain milling area for more than 800 years. Although there were quite a few people there, I still found it to be really tranquil, especially as we walked along the Water of Leith walkway. Our next destination was Old Town, but first we wandered through what would become one of my favorite neighborhoods in Edinburgh, Stockbridge. I spent more time admiring the Georgian architecture, cute shops, and had to constantly remind myself to walk on the left side of the sidewalk. In Stockbridge, we visited our first pub called St. Vincent, one of our many quick pub stops while visiting Scotland. Dave even picked up a few books from their free library, and I enjoyed a hot gin, which was perfect for a cool autumn day. Finally, we crossed Princess Street to head into the very touristy Old Town part of Edinburgh. We visited Victoria Street, the supposed inspiration for Harry Potter's Diagon Alley. I love the colorful shops and the way the street curves. We didn't spend much time here as it was pretty crowded. Next, we headed up the stairs to the Vennel Viewpoint, a popular area to get a good shot of Edinburgh Castle, and stopped by Greyfriars Kirkyard Cemetery, where the beloved statue of Bobby was erected. I have to admit, I was emotional seeing this because I love dogs, and I remember reading the story about him when I was younger. We then strolled through the Royal Mile, a very crowded area of Edinburgh, stopping at the Jolly Judge, a tiny pub that felt very local, and lastly Edinburgh Castle, which we only viewed from the outside, which was fine by me. At this point we were both very tired, so we had an early dinner at the Badger & Company, a Wind in the Willows inspired bar and restaurant where I enjoyed my first pie of beef and haggis. After sleeping for nearly 11 hours, we woke up to some rainier Scotland weather and decided to set our sights on visiting Stirling in the morning and doing some more Edinburgh activities in the afternoon. Our first stop for breakfast was a cute little place called Urban Angel. On our walk to Waverley train station, we said hello to Paddington Bear in St. Andrew's Park, which is part of a trail of Paddington Bear statues across the UK and Ireland, and enjoyed a walk through Princess Street Gardens. Anytime we could get off the busy streets and onto a nature path, we did. Our train to Stirling took about 40 minutes as we passed through some pretty countryside. The train station is right in town, and we decided our first stop would be the Stirling Distillery. So we headed up a steep road to the cute and cozy establishment which sits under the shadow of the Stirling Castle. We were the only ones there, so we got a private lesson from the lovely Ruth on some of the whiskies in various regions of Scotland.
For us, we use a lot of American oak casks, right. So they'll have been used once for bourbon, then we'll get them, we'll use them, and we tend to use our casks up to the point where there's nothing else to get from them, so we can get like up to and over 100 years out of each cask, so it's quite different.
I actually didn't think I would like whiskey as much as I did, and thus began a series of whiskey tastings throughout my trip, albeit a wee dram at a time. Next, we headed further up the winding road to Stirling Castle, where Mary was crowned Queen of Scots at the age of 9 months on September 9, 1543. You have to pay to explore even the outside of the castle, but it was worth it for me to see the same walls Mary once did hundreds of years ago. I tried to imagine what her life must have been like and the danger she must have always felt, even though the views from the castle of the countryside are peaceful and serene. Next, we headed back down into the village, and I was reminded of how much I prefer some of the smaller villages in Europe more than the big cities. Of course, you have to visit the big cities to see some of the most famous sights, but I prefer the quiet, quaint streets of small towns so much more. On the train back to Edinburgh, it started raining quite a bit. Thankfully, I was prepared with what I packed, so after doing a tour of the real Mary King's Close, which we were not allowed to film, we went for a very long and rainy walk around Arthur's Seat and Holyrood Park, past the University of Edinburgh, to have dinner at the Sheep Heid Inn in Duddingston Village, the oldest surviving public house in Scotland, dating back to 1360. As we dried off, we enjoyed the cozy atmosphere and delicious food. On the third day, we met up with the tour group with Rabbies to begin our journey to the Highlands and the Isle of Skye, but I'll cover that in the next video, so we'll jump ahead several days to when we arrived back in Edinburgh from our tour and continue to explore the city. Since we didn't have much day left after we got back, we just enjoyed a dinner at the Cumberland Bar before turning in for the night. Our next hotel in the city was the Royal Scots Club, which, like the Hotel Edinburgh, was in New Town. It was in one of the Georgian buildings, and it's a beautiful old hotel that made us feel like royalty, even though the rooms were reasonably priced. Our first order of business was to head towards Holyrood Park, but first was a stop at Calton Hill, which gave us gorgeous views of the city and warmed up our legs for Arthur's Seat. The National Monument, a neoclassical structure, stands as a tribute to the fallen Scottish soldiers of the Napoleonic Wars. Of course, I had to climb it for a picture, and it's not as easy as it looks, but eventually I got up there, and it was crazy windy. Dave had a much easier time. We then walked towards the Palace of Holyrood House, which was where Mary Queen of Scots lived between 1561 and 1567, and also the scene of the grisly murder of her private secretary, David Rizzio. But it was closed for the day, so we just got glimpses of the outside. Next, we began our hike up to Arthur's Seat, which is a mostly short but pretty steep hike. I do think there are gentler paths that get you to the top, however, depending on where you start.
Made it to the top of Arthur's Seat.
At the very top, the wind was howling, so we didn't spend a lot of time up there, but the views were beautiful. We took the gentle way back down along the back side of Arthur's Seat and enjoyed more pretty views and a lovely fall walk back towards Edinburgh's city centre. Of course, it just so happens we were near Holyrood Distillery, so we stopped in for some whiskey tastings and pretty much had the whole place to ourselves. Feeling a little buzzed from that stop, we had lunch at the Richmond Cafe, which served Mediterranean food and was absolutely delicious. Later that evening, we headed back to Stockbridge where we had dinner at Hector's and joined in their trivia night, which was really fun. I'm pretty sure by now my arteries are really starting to clog with all the meat pies I've been enjoying. The next day, we set off by train to the English town on the border of England and Scotland, Berwick-upon-Tweed, which I'll make a separate video for, so we'll pick it up to when we arrive back into town. After leaving the train station, we checked out Rose Street, a street in New Town with decorative string lights and cute pubs galore. Our friend recommended Dirty Dick's, so that was the first place we stopped. Next, we went to the Oxford Bar, a pub popular author Ian Rankin is said to frequent, which we can say is true since we passed him on his way out. Next up was the Cauldron, a witch and wizard inspired bar where you can make your own potions, aka drinks. It was kind of a fun place, but it felt a bit overpriced and a little too kitschy to me. Finally, it was back to Rose Street where we had dinner at the Black Rose Tavern, a rock and roll themed pub where I had the comfort food of all comfort foods, macaroni and cheese. And that was it. We woke up early to catch our flight and bid farewell to Scotland. It was absolutely magical, and I look forward to sharing the middle part of our week visiting the Highlands and the Isle of Skye in the next video. Thanks for watching.